Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Tonight, the daughter of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, filmmaker Alexandra Pelosi. Her new HBO movie is about her travels with American Evangelicals. And we'll continue our series, Earth to New York. Tonight, Afghanistan to New York. But first, this week's online video review. You've no doubt seen clips of Hillary Clinton's online announcement that she's forming one of those presidential campaign exploratory committees. But did you know it didn't stop there? Senator Clinton had live video online chats Monday night and last night answering tough questions like this.
Our next question is from Peg in Corning, New York. Tonight the President will give his State of the Union speech. What are your thoughts leading up to this? And is there anything specifically that you're listening for?
You know, the State of the Union is a time for the President to come and report to Congress and the people. I think that we need to make our union stronger than it is right now. I'm sure the President will put the best face on it from his perspective, but if we're honest, we know that we are facing very dangerous and difficult situations in Iraq and with Iran and North Korea, and you know, the terrible problems in Darfur and disease and so many, you know, difficulties that we have to confront. And here at home,
well, sometimes the web doesn't change everything. Now, while most Americans saw some news clips of Senator Clinton's original online announcement over the weekend, many did not realize there was another hat thrown into the ring via campaign website, the hat belonging to conservative Republican Senator Sam Brownback of Kansas. And since the media loves to deconstruct what female candidates are wearing and what kind of couches they keep in their living rooms, we're glad that blogger Jeff Jarvis decided to deconstruct both Clinton's and Brownback's website introductions. Check it out.
Here's a tale of two tapes. On the same day, political polar opposites Hillary Clinton and Sam Brownback announced their presidential campaigns using video online. It's so damn cool. Brownback looks like he's at Mount Vernon. Those were the days. And Hillary looks like she's in the Oval Office. Hillary enumerates all her issues one by one.
Let's talk about how to bring the right end to the war in Iraq and to restore respect for America around the world. How to make us energy independent and free of foreign oil. How to end the deficits that threaten Social Security and Medicare. And let's definitely talk about how every American can have quality, affordable health care.
Meanwhile, Brownback pushes the God and family button every way he can.
Two pillars of our society are in need of rebuilding: our families and our culture. So much of what we are as a nation and what we will be are tied to families and culture. We need to revitalize marriage, support the formation of families, and encourage a culture of commitment. And we need a culture that encourages what is right and discourages what is wrong. And we need the wisdom to understand the difference.
They're both just plain folk.
I grew up in a middle-class family in the middle of America, and we believed in that promise. I still do.
I'm a husband and father of 5. I grew up on a family farm in Parker, Kansas, where my parents still work the land. I was taught Midwestern values that have shaped my life. Work hard, pray hard, and always respect other people.
Brownback ends with, well, a prayer.
And I would appreciate your support and your prayers. God bless you, and God bless America.
Hillary, on the other hand, ends with an invitation to discussion and democracy.
So let's talk, let's chat, let's start a dialogue about your ideas and mine. Because the conversation in Washington has been just a little one-sided lately, don't you think? And we can all see how well that works. And while I can't visit everyone's living room, I can try. And with a little help from modern technology, I'll be holding live online video chats this week starting Monday. So let the conversation begin. I have a feeling it's going to be very interesting.
Interesting indeed, and thanks to blogger Jeff Jarvis, who, by the way, also teaches journalism at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. So politicians are using the web more and more to bypass annoying reporters like me and make their cases directly to you. But this week we found something new, a lawyer using the web to make a public appeal for a client he represents. In this case, the client is a detainee at the U.S. prison at Guantanamo Bay. If he can't get a trial by a jury of his peers, he'll take the next best thing, an opening argument on YouTube.
This is Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and over here behind me, a beautiful Caribbean beach. Over there to my left-hand side, the combined bachelor quarters where I've been staying. I've been down here meeting with detainee number 940, who I know better as Adel Hassan Hamad. Here's a picture of him that was taken a week or 10 days before he was arrested. Adel wrote to the United States District Court in the District of Columbia and asked the court for help. The court assigned our office to look into his case, and I have been halfway around the world trying to figure out whether or not what he has said has been truthful. The evidence gathered in this investigation underscores the conclusion of the Army Major who dissented from the tribunal decision and used the word unconscionable to describe Mr. Hamad's detention. I've been down here and I've met with him for the first time. I can't tell you anything about what happened during that visit. It's subject to classification rules at this time. But what I can tell you, I think, is after I met with him, I just had a profound sense of sadness, and I wish I could be in a position to give him more hope and be able to tell him at some point, yeah, Adele, you're going to go home.
I'd like to hear the other side, but if a lawyer makes an argument and there's no judge to hear it, is there sound? The next feature in our online video review is 17 seconds from the afterlife.
Hi, I'm Art Buckwell and I just died. I was put on earth to make people laugh.
And he almost made me cry. Political humorist Art Buchwald, who died last week. That was from the New York Times website. Someone there got the ghoulish idea of interviewing lots of celebrities about their own obituaries and then holding them until the Reaper calls. Journalism at its best, isn't it? Our final stop tonight before we meet Nancy Pelosi's daughter, filmmaker Alexandra Pelosi, comes from South Korea. This is an espionage adventure short based on the premise that the United States has just imposed sanctions on North Korea and material is desperately needed for the country.
Commander, 007.
All country in the world embargo against us. Our country is in big trouble. We are short of everything. Among them, one thing is the most important and crucial. To get this stuff, we have lost 6 top agents. They're all killed by a man in black.
Damn evil USA.
How do you know he's American?
Who dare to stop us except America?
This money is enough to buy that stuff.
But what is my aim?
This is your aim. It's relative to our country's destiny.
What's this? Why it is important?
Yes, even in the context of a nuclear standoff, the punchline is booze for dear leader. Maybe 24 will end with a bottle of cognac too this year, who knows. And that's it for our online video review for this week. Coming up in a minute, filmmaker Alexandra Pelosi. We will check out clips from her new documentary about evangelicals in America and ask about seeing her mom become Speaker of the House. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Global warming. Some say irreversible consequences are 30 years away. 30 years? That won't affect me.
This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Do you want to complete your college degree while balancing career and family obligations? Do you want a flexible schedule and a challenging curriculum? If you've earned at least 30 credits or an associate degree, now's your chance to finish what you started at CUNY. Learn about CUNY's online baccalaureate in communication and culture. Visit cuny.edu/online or call 212-652-CUNY.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Now we'll meet filmmaker Alexandra Pelosi. And if that last name sounds familiar, yes, she is the daughter of the brand new Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. But Alexandra Pelosi is an accomplished political documentarian in her own right. Maybe you saw her HBO films, Journeys with George, about George W. Bush's 2000 presidential campaign, or Diary of a Political Tourist, in which she shadowed 7 Democratic presidential hopefuls for the 2004 campaign. By the way, did you hear that John Kerry dropped out today for 08? This time, Pelosi turns her one-woman lens on American evangelicals in an HBO documentary called Friends of God, Travels with Alexandra Pelosi. It debuts tomorrow night at 9 on HBO. Here's an excerpt narrated by Alexandra Pelosi.
Depending on who you ask, there are between 50 and 80 million evangelical Christians in America. Ever since they started showing their influence at the ballot box, they've become a formidable force in our culture and our democracy. But the evangelical movement is a big tent, so we're going to hit the road to meet some evangelicals, to find out what they believe and what it means for the future of America.
Hello, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
That is one big arena. We're going to see another clip of it in a minute, but where was that?
Houston, Texas. That's Lakewood Church. That's Joel Osteen's church. 16,000 people per seating, and they do 3 seatings a day, and then they do a Hispanic sermon. So, yeah, they pack in a lot. And it's a really good time. Joel Osteen is like the Christian Oprah. He gives a lot of self-help. He doesn't do politics. He doesn't do anything controversial or anything that would provoke, you know, he just does very light Christian sermons.
See, now this is amazing to me because until I read your press release this morning, and then you just told me, and I found out that Joel Osteen is the most watched televangelist in America. True?
Yeah, true. He's very popular. And when he came to New York City, he sold out 3 nights at Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
So it's not just a red state.
Not just a red state thing. So I would have said, you know, Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, people like that. But this guy is the most popular televangelist in America. What's his thing?
Well, he does a lot of self-help. He says, don't go to the ice cream. Don't eat the ice cream. When you're going through the grocery store, don't turn your cart towards the ice cream. You don't need the ice cream. He does a lot. Or, why don't you put on some Victoria's Secret? I'll tell you, my wife, Victoria's Secret, she's Victoria's Secret shopper. You know, things that are very self-help, motivational. They're not very deep in theology. They're more feel-good, and that's very popular.
I know everybody wants to hear me ask you about seeing your mother at the State of the Union address last night, sitting behind the president. We will get to that.
Oh,
but first, let's see another clip from Friends of God. This is one evangelical attending that same mega church, 35,000 people.
What is going on around here? I mean, to pack 16,000 people into the stadium where the Houston Rockets used to play?
I believe it's a new day in our society. I mean, faith in America is at an all-time high. And I really believe there's a spiritual awakening taking place, that there's a force out here, a force of people that love God and that go to church and that want to see our country stay on the right path, to spread the love of Christ all over the world and just to make the world a better place and let them know it's, you know, there are good days ahead.
Okay, why did you make a documentary about evangelicals? Was it to understand them? Was it to mock them? What?
Well, I don't do anything to mock anyone. I had an interest in politics, and then after the 2004 presidential election, they said that the evangelicals were a really powerful force in helping re-elect George Bush. So I thought, I don't know any evangelicals. Who are these evangelicals? I want to go out and meet some. So that's what got me to the church.
Right. And what did you learn?
Well, professionally, I learned the evangelicals are very organized. They go to church on Sunday, and then they go to marriage amendment meetings, and they mobilize for, in this case, to defend marriage.
Marriage amendment, you mean a constitutional amendment to ban gay marriage?
Right. So they're very organized in their churches, and they're very politically active, and they are a force to be reckoned with. And that's something that people in New York don't realize, that every Sunday in America, there are people in churches organizing to attack your lifestyle.
What else did you learn?
Well, on a personal note, I learned it's very important. I have a newborn baby at home, and it's really important to expose your children to some religion so that they understand it and they have some experience with it, so that when they grow up, they're not what the church people call unchurched. And the unchurched are the ones who are very susceptible to some of the more extreme religions later in life.
I'm going to read you some email that we got after you were on the radio with me this morning, okay? And everybody knows who you are. You're Nancy Pelosi's daughter. It was clear from our discussion that you share a lot of her liberal politics, and you were giving your takes on evangelicals. We'll see some more clips from the movie. So people wrote in things like this. Your guest advises that adding an agenda to her work would be incorrect, but yet she's contradicting herself in her very work. By showcasing the evangelical movement as a select group of whites in the South, that in itself is an agenda. It doesn't seem she attempted to portray a more holistic view of the evangelical movement.
That's from someone who's never even seen the movie. The movie hasn't even aired yet. But I understand and I respect people's... You know, I'm not pretending to be any kind of authority about anything. I mean, the people that I interviewed for this movie all presented themselves as authorities. I'm just saying, look, I got in my car with my $1,000 handheld camera and I met some politically active evangelicals and some culturally powerful evangelicals. That's it. I'm not pretending. This is not an encyclopedia of all the evangelicals in America. This is just a small portion of the people I met over the course of 2 years. And I think it's really easy to write in and have comments about all these things, but this was 2 years of my life that I went to bed every night thinking, how do these people look and what do they believe, and is this an accurate portrait of the people that I met over the course of 2 years?
Right, and you kind of described it to me as anthropology. Here you are, this, San Franciscan, now living in New York. This is not your world, and you wanted to find out what was all about, what these folks are all about, what makes them tick, correct?
Right, and I'll tell you this. I screened this movie last week in Washington, D.C. for the Washington media establishment. And Chris Matthews hosted a panel after to discuss about some of the issues that were raised in the movie. And he said in his introduction to the film, well, I'm really glad you made this movie because I never knew these people existed. And his first question to one of the panelists was, do these people watch TV?
How could he not know this?
Well, I'm just saying. So
this is America in the 21st
maybe your
century.
Listeners and your viewers are much smarter than most of the Washington media establishment.
I don't know. But here's another one that wrote, Alexandra Pelosi's veiled attempt to cover her elitist outlook is pathetic. Her comments about living with the plebeians in the provincial heartland during the making of her documentary, because you lived with some for a month, you did this for a year, your travels, right? Prove what most Americans think of her, her mother, and most San Franciscans.
All right. I'm not offended by that. I mean, I understand that there are, two different philosophies, and they don't agree with me, and that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. I just wish I was elitist. I wish I had enough money to pay my mortgage.
Here now is the best Ted Haggard clip ever. Haggard, remember, was the former president of the National Association of Evangelicals until last fall, when a male prostitute accused him of homosexual activity and drug abuse. Haggard confessed to sexual immorality and resigned his leadership positions. Amazingly, this clip of Ted Haggard was recorded by Pelosi before the scandal broke.
All the surveys say that evangelicals have the best sex life of any other group.
Oh, come on. No way.
Oh, yeah. But let's just find out. How often do you have sex with your wife?
Every day.
Every day?
Twice a day.
How about twice a day sometimes? Okay, how about you?
Yeah. Every day.
Every day. Let's say out of 100 times when you have sex, what percentage does she climax?
Everyone.
Everyone. How about you?
Everyone.
Okay.
Everyone.
These guys, who'd have thought these are a bunch of studs? Look at them.
That's right.
Look at that. We got to join this church. There's a lot of love in this place.
There's a lot of love in this place. And you don't think these babies just come out of nowhere, do you?
Now, just like I didn't know Joel Osteen, until the scandal, I would not have known the name or the face of Ted Haggard. Now I know it because that face has been on TV in this whole other context. But if I had not known, I would have been shocked. And I guess I am still shocked to see the president, former president of the National Association of Evangelicals, having that conversation to you.
And that's why I included it in the documentary. I thought it was interesting that they talked about sex so much for people who make all of their political issues revolve around sexual issues like abortion and gay marriage.
So is this like the radical Muslims saying that the suicide bombers are going to get 72 virgins or whatever it is after they die? If you have evangelical religion and you are faithful to your wife, you're going to have sex every day and she's going to climax every time and it's going to be the best sex ever? I mean, is it like that?
I'm so not going to answer that question. You're leading me into a trap that's going to get you lots of hateful emails addressed to me.
Well, but what is it? Tell me what it is. You don't have to.
I don't understand it. I didn't pretend to understand it. I just went to, meet these people and talk to them. I really don't know what to make of Ted Haggard, really. To this day, I mean, I still go to bed every night wondering, what is with that guy? I just don't know.
Was that the only sex talk that you encountered?
Of course not. There was plenty. I mean, you have to remember, for a documentary, for every time you see it, that means there's 100 other examples. That, what you do is you take all the footage you have and you think, okay, what are the key things that come out in conversation? Let's just take one sample of that. There's always plenty more where, every time but you don't want to bore people with, hours and hours of the same stuff.
What was the context of that clip?
I asked them why they were so happy.
Who was that guy with Haggard?
There were two church members. One of them ran for the state senate in Colorado, but didn't win. He's
talking about what great sex he had with his wife?
Right. He's the communications director for the National Association of Evangelicals. That's just average. I mean, that's who they are.
That's part of their thing.
Yeah.
Let's see. We're going to see a Jerry Falwell clip in a minute. Talk about your recording style. You go out with a camera
I have a $1,000 handheld Sony microphone. $1,000 handheld Sony camera with no microphone. I mean, the on-camera mic is the only microphone that I have.
It's a camcorder, like
you buy at Circuit City. Yeah. And
it's better than my, $200 camcorder that I tape my kids with.
Right, probably. I'm not sure though. Sometimes I go places and I see people shooting video of their kids with better cameras than I have to shoot my HBO documentary. So I get a rental car and I drive, and I usually film while driving. That's usually, anytime you see a road shot, that's a driving while filming shot. And, I just stayed in truck stops and talked to people that I met along the way. I don't really do advance. I don't really have, interviews with people on the phone or anything. I don't send letters to people. I just go.
You don't call up and say, well, then how do you get a Jerry Falwell or a Ted Haggard or something like that to talk to you?
Well, with Jerry Falwell, I just went to his 4th of July parade. He owns this town in Lynchburg, Virginia. So I just showed up at their picnic that they have every 4th of July, and I asked his people if I could speak with him, and I told him I was from HBO, and they let me in his RV. It's that simple.
Right. Did he know you were Nancy Pelosi's daughter?
He didn't. At the end of the interview, his son sort of figured it out, because I think he had seen my Bush movie, and he said, you know who her mom is? And then Jerry Falwell said, your mom is very smart. She's very bright, but very wrong. And then that was the end of the interview.
Yeah. So you are or you aren't trying to make a political point?
I never thought I was trying to make a political point.
Never trying to make a political point?
No, I didn't think that there's no politics in this movie. I mean, most of it is cultural. It's about this other America that exists outside of the coasts, where we have wrestling, they have Christian wrestling. We have surfing, they have Christian surfing. We have hip-hop, they have the hip-hop church, that they take things from popular culture and they bring it into their Christian world, and that's what they use as the hook to bring in the kids, to attract them to...
Since you mentioned the wrestling, you may know that some evangelicals have their own churches and their own schools, but did you know that some evangelicals have their own wrestling federation?
Some people.
This looks like it hurts.
I've broken both of my thumbs. I've had shoulder problems, back problems. I go to a chiropractor all the time just for low back injury.
It's a lot of pain, for Christ.
Yes, it is. But you know what? It's all worth it, because when you think about the pain Christ went through on the cross for us, this pales in comparison. So I'll take this kind of pain any day for what Jesus did for us.
See, now you told me on the radio this morning that you thought it was real wrestling. I asked you, was it fake WWF kind of wrestling or real wrestling like they do in college? I think you said it was real wrestling. But now that I've seen the clip, that's the fake wrestling. Like a boom, boom,
Is there
boom.
anything
You don't do that in real wrestling.
There's no such thing as real wrestling. It's all fake.
Well, no, there's a sport. There is an actual sport of wrestling.
Oh.
Mostly it's only done in college, as far as I know. But it ain't that.
It looked real to me. I mean, they were like, if you see more of it, they were like jumping on top of each other.
Yeah. Well, they're mostly, stuntmen. But in the other kind of in secular wrestling, I guess they'd call it, there are all these characters that are developed, and there's good guys and there's bad guys.
Oh, they had a play. They have a
Harry
morality.
Potter and there's Voldemort. It's always that kind of a standoff. Was it like that?
Yeah, they had Jonah at the end would come in. They have the good guy, bad guy setup, and it was all from the Bible. It was the Bible. They had all the characters of the Bible there, and they had the apocalypse, and it was a whole play.
So, do you think you came out friendlier or more hostile or neither to red state, and I guess we should say this is like red state white evangelicals that you're following, they're not Bronx Pentecostals.
Right.
Right?
Right. It's hard to, well, it's funny. I think it's interesting that people are saying, but I'm not in there, but I'm not in there. There are 80 million evangelicals. I couldn't cover 80 million people. I was just showing you, here's who I met on this road trip. It's funny because Jesus Camp was a documentary that was nominated for the Academy Award, and it covered the smallest portion of the population that exists. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's like, well, there are these people that exist, and this is a small portion of them. And so to this, I think, is a much bigger portion, but it's still a portion. There's no way you could do so. It's like saying the media. There's no such thing as the media.
Right.
They're not, the evangelicals, 80 million of them. But see, Jerry Falwell says there are 80 million of us. And everyone that's calling into your show is saying, hey, I'm not one of them. I'm not one of them. The research groups...
They say, I'm a different kind of evangelical.
Right. And so Barna, which is a Christian polling organization, says that there are 20 million evangelicals. And then the Pew Forum says there are 50 million. And then Jerry Falwell says they're 80 million. So Jerry Falwell is counting Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter in his numbers. See, so it's his number that's going with 80 million, not me.
And I always see when they break down votes after an election, it's usually about 20% of the electorate. That's not to say the public, but 20% of the electorate identifies as evangelical Christian.
Right, and 21% of the evangelical Christians voted for John Kerry in the last election.
21% of those voted for John Kerry.
Right. So there are Democrats that are evangelicals, and there are liberal evangelicals, and then there are lots of evangelicals that care about the war and that care about global warming. But it's hard because, you know, there's no definition. There's no, you don't, they don't have a pope. There's no organizing principle where you say, well, I belong, and it's like, I'm a Catholic, so in our church you say, well, to be in our church, this is, I can tell you there's a pope, and here's Vatican II. You know, we can tell you what we believe. They don't have that.
So was this like going to a foreign country for you?
Well, you know, I would say yes, but then if I did, I would get lots of hate mail because people say, you're such an elitist coastal person. The thing that cracks me up about this, I'm the one that's willing to admit it. I live in New York, and I'm from San Francisco, and I say, God, it's funny, there's a whole other world out there. In my circles, people call them flyover states. But, you know, it's funny to me that if you admit that, then you're considered elitist.
Right. But you were curious.
I was curious.
Right. And it's in a political context. I mean, your films are political. You did a George W. Bush film in 2000 when he was on the campaign trail, right? You did a Democrats on the campaign trail film in 2004.
Wasn't that one miscast?
What do
Starring John Kerry. I'm just saying, if you're looking for a leading man, John Kerry shouldn't be the one you go.
So now you're doing this because you were interested in that evangelical, that so-called values vote after the 2004 election. So you wanted to know more. You wanted to communicate more to who? To people like you in the
people who watch HBO. I mean, they don't watch HBO in the Bible Belt. They call it Hell's Box Office.
HBO, Hell's Box Office?
Yeah.
People really say that?
Oh, yeah. And I told you this morning, I tried to get an interview with Judge Roy Moore, because I wanted to see his Ten Commandments statue.
That's the judge in Alabama, I think, who posted the Ten Commandments in his courtroom and ultimately got, I think, stripped of his judgeship because he wouldn't take him down, right?
Yep, and I asked him for an interview, and he said, HBO, that's porn. I'm not talking to you. So sometimes walking in the door from New York City and saying HBO is not going to help.
Right. So did you come out of this experience, you don't have to characterize it as going to a foreign country, as, you know, more favorably disposed to who these folks are, more understanding, more empathetic, more angry, less so? What?
Well, just with the understanding that, wow, it's a big country, and there's some people out there that don't believe any of the things that I believe. I was raised by nuns in San Francisco in a Catholic school, and they taught us evolution, and they never mentioned homosexuality. That was their interpretation of the Bible. It's interesting that I would meet people in churches that said, the Bible says evolution is wrong and that homosexuality is a sin. It's the same book, but it's interpreted differently depending on where you are. And it's just interesting. I don't know that it's, you know, how I feel about it. I'm just saying it's interesting that there are all these different opinions and that, you know, there are more of them than there are of us. I stayed with a family with 10 kids. They're reproducing 11 times faster than I am. You know, they have their 11th child now and I have one. So, you know, when you think about it,
that's why they're having all that sex.
What does the future of America look like?
So when Bill O'Reilly calls your mother a secular progressive, maybe he's doing that right now, I don't know.
Probably.
She sent you to Catholic school.
She has gone to church every Sunday since I've been alive. But somehow that doesn't translate if it's not, you know, their evangelical, born-again faith that they have in the Republican Party, then it's not, you know, Jewish, Catholic, it's all the same to them. If you're not born again, you're not going to heaven, and that's their interpretation. So I somehow she's been painted as sort of an ungodly, you know, liberal, when it cracks me up because she probably goes to church more than a lot of those other people do.
Now, did you say you went to Catholic school and
Convent
they taught
of the Sacred Heart
in San Francisco, and they taught you evolution, and they never mentioned homosexuality in Catholic school?
Nope.
Or maybe that's the thing. They're trying to get it not to be mentioned in public school, some of the activists.
Yeah. Maybe that's the thing.
But you weren't told that it was a sin or that it was wrong?
No, I mean, we had nuns. Nuns taught us science and Latin, and we had every morning started with chapel. And I was there from kindergarten through senior year in high school, and all my sisters were too. So it's funny because we sit down and we say, like, did they ever mention it in your class? Maybe I missed that day. maybe I was asleep when the nuns were talking that day. Did they mention homosexuality in your class? And, you know, it was San Francisco, so that it didn't come up.
Jerry Falwell is in this film, too, talking what else? Politics.
Evangelicals are the largest minority bloc in this country. It's not a majority, but I don't think you can win without them. And I think if they're unified, you'll lose if they go against you. John Kerry learned that, Al Gore learned that, and Hillary will learn it in 2008. The church is the only hope for the recovery of this country. And this is a do-or-die thing with us. We're not playing games with it. We absolutely are planning to take this nation back for God.
That was your token political clip?
Well, you can't do a piece about a movement and not have one of the leaders. I avoided the Pat Robertson, James Dobsons, because they seem like these old scolds who just tell people, you know, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And Jerry Falwell seems to have some personality. He has some sense of humor about himself, believe it or not. I don't know if you can tell in this, but he really seems, he's like the grandpa of this university that he has. And what's more important is that he has young champions for Christ that he trains in his university, and they go door to door.
Yeah.
He says, he gets up in his university and he says, tomorrow there's an election. I want you all to go out and go door to door and campaign for this candidate. And guess what? They do. He has people on the streets, soldiers, and that makes him powerful. I mean, you can't, a lot of evangelicals would say, Jerry Falwell doesn't speak for me. But you know what? He has a lot of students that he's trained. They have a law school where they're training people to do battle with the ACLU. I mean, he does have some influence because he is training the next generation.
When you meet evangelicals, especially young ones, I guess you're saying, who say Jerry Falwell does not speak for me, what are they talking about?
Well, they're saying, he says there's only two issues that matter to evangelicals, abortion and gay marriage. And that's just not the case. A lot of evangelicals care about the war. A lot of evangelicals care about global warming. He says these are the only two things that matter to our group of people, and that's just not accurate.
Did you see Sam Brownback's web video introduction to his campaign? We played it earlier in the show. He's, you know, one of them. He's one of the evangelicals, and he's running for president. But he made a point of saying, I am not just concerned about abortion when I talk about life. I'm concerned about Darfur. I'm concerned about people in poverty, all this stuff. Is that a new evangelical positioning?
Yes, and I think it's interesting now that the Democrats have taken over Washington. I think it's really popular to be a little more like, oh, I'm interested in the poor. I'm interested. It's like they have to adapt to the new political environment because abortion and gay marriage worked last time in the last presidential election, but I don't think they're going to play in the next one. I think people are a little more concerned now about the war and global warming and other issues.
So what was it like to see your mother sitting behind President Bush last night at the State of the Union address?
Well, you know, it was just as exciting for me as it was for a lot of women who, you know, had never seen a woman sitting there. I know. Well, you know, I told you this morning on the radio, I hate to repeat myself, but it's weird for me because I was raised with a stay-at-home mom, like the 60s housewife. My mother had 5 kids. She spent the 60s pregnant and the 70s driving carpool. And so for us, it's like watching The Twilight Zone because, you know, she left the house when I went to college, she went to Congress, and then for the last 20 years, that's where she's been. And in that 20 years, she became the most powerful woman in America. So it's funny to us because she never had ambitions around it. She never gave us any, you know, sort of, you have to go out there and change the world. She was more like, you have to learn how to be a housewife. You know, she taught us skills like my sisters have kids, and that's, to us, she's always just been the woman who taught us how to keep a house and how to cook dinner and how to keep your husband happy. So to us, she's more like, you know, not just mom, but really like a good mom, you know, a real mom. And some moms now are all just working and career-minded, but that's not my mom. So
and was she political when she was driving carpool? Was she busting out of her skin? What did you say, it was the 70s? That, Nixon, whatever?
No, I don't even remember her mentioning Richard Nixon in our household. But, you know, I mean, of course, now looking back, you can read the tea leaves. I mean, she did volunteer for the California Democratic Party while we were in school. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you think about that. We were in school. She was always there when we got home with the chocolate cookies ready. So we didn't really notice. But now, of course, you can look back and, well, it was funny that Jerry Brown was sitting in our living room when we got home from school. You know, these are things that you have to put together now.
Alexandra Pelosi, thank you very much. Friends of God is the name of the film, and it debuts tomorrow night at 9 o'clock on HBO. And then, like a lot of things on HBO, it'll show about a zillion times at all times of the day and in the middle of the night, right?
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up in a minute, we continue our series, Earth to New York. This time, it's Afghanistan to New York. We'll check in on that other war that's not going so well either, and the Afghan community in New York. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Do you want to complete your college degree while balancing career and family obligations? Do you want a flexible schedule and a challenging curriculum? If you've earned at least 30 credits or an associate degree, now's your chance to finish what you started at CUNY. Learn about CUNY's online baccalaureate in communication and culture. Visit cuny.edu/online or call 212-652-CUNY.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Now we continue our series, Earth to New York, where we look at online video and talk about the issues from any country on Earth and the local community from that country, since there are people in New York from everywhere after all. Tonight, it's Afghanistan to New York. Afghanistan is a country that always gets too little press, considering we're in another difficult war over there that gets overshadowed by Iraq. Google Earth is taking us in toward the capital, Kabul. You can see the metropolitan area. And we'll go back out and in toward the Tora Bora region, way up in the mountains by the Pakistan border, where they think Osama bin Laden might be. And now the long way from Afghanistan to New York, 6,740 miles from the capital, according to geobytes.com. They had some light snow in Kabul today, by the way, and temps around the freezing mark. Well, better than here. But for as much Iraq war footage as we may usually see on television, we don't see very much Afghan war footage at all. So here is a 15-second clip that we got from the web of an American attack helicopter in action in the Afghan mountains.
We got it above. We got him straight in front of us. Come on. Fucking right. There we go.
But it's not only the Americans who can launch missiles in that war. We found this Al-Qaeda video on the web. This glorifies the Taliban.
إنا إليهم زاحف بعمائم لهم الكفن بالخير تصهل كالرعد من فوقها نسل الأسد بالخير تصهل كالرعود من فوقها نسل الأسود سكبوا الدماء حبا يرجون موفقا واشهد علينا يا زمن.
Important videos to remind us that there is still a war going on over there. With me now to talk about the war and the Afghan community in New York, Aaron Nazir. He is a researcher for Human Rights Watch. He is just back from 6 months in Afghanistan, where he was investigating human rights abuses by the Taliban and tracing the human rights situation in general. Thank you very much for coming in. I appreciate your time.
Thank
you. You were 6 months in Afghanistan, recently back this fall. What were you there to see exactly?
Well, basically, I was there to research human rights abuses perpetrated by the Taliban and other insurgent groups like Hizb Islami, that's led by Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. I basically traveled the country and interviewed victims of suicide bombings or roadside bombings or targeted assassinations, and to get their impression of what is really happening in Afghanistan and bring the war down to a human level.
What is the human rights situation overall, and how would you say it's different, better, worse, whatever, from before the U.S. invasion 5 years ago?
Well, it is better than before the U.S. invasion, but it is backsliding. A lot of the gains that were made in these 5 years have started to backslide over this past year, in 2006.
In what ways?
For example, in southern Afghanistan, roughly 300,000 children have been forced from school due to the fighting. The Taliban have burnt down many schools. The small but significant gains for women and girls are backsliding in many ways. There's pushback on the Ministry of Women's Affairs in Kabul. There's pushback to girls being educated in general.
Pushback to girls being educated in general.
Yes.
And how do they enforce that?
Basically, it's basically the Taliban and other groups that are enforcing it on an ad hoc basis by burning down schools, burning down girls' schools, or what they often do is put out what they call night letters or threats underneath families' doors or underneath the doors of schools, threatening to burn down or assassinate a teacher if they continue educating girls.
So what does your group do to fight this?
Well, basically what we've done, we actually issued a report on this issue back in July called Lessons in Terror. It basically documented roughly 200 or so school attacks and assassinations of teachers and students in 2005 and 2006. And by documenting that, we got the stories of the individuals that were affected by this, just the ordinary Afghans. And what we did is we put that into a report form, and we advocated using benchmarks to measure security. And one of those benchmarks is how many children are going back to school. So we take those recommendations and advocate at the highest levels in Kabul, in the European Union, Canada, and here in Washington and New York.
We do have our phone number up on the screen, 212-251-0801. If anybody has any questions for my guest who works for Human Rights Watch in Afghanistan, says he'll be going back there as well. He spent a lot of time there over the last few years and is going to do more. A great resource and a courageous man to do just what he's doing. But we can take some phone calls for him on the situation over there, or anybody in the Afghan New York community want to call up and talk about your community here, you can do that. 212-251-0801. As I said, we don't have much time for phone calls, but we'll try to sneak in a few. 212-251-0801. Are you the right person to ask, how's the war going?
The situation, the better question is what's going on the ground, and how is the conflict affecting the ordinary Afghan? And in fact, it's having in fact, the situation in Afghanistan has deteriorated quite substantially over 2005. As most people now know, there is a resurgent Taliban. There's renewed war in southern Afghanistan, which is affecting all parts of the country. Over 4,000 people have lost their lives because of the renewed conflict, and just alone in 2006, 1,000 of those civilians. Like I said, 300,000 children out of school. Warlords still, with their illegal militias, still roam the streets of Afghanistan. And all this really while the international community continues to shortchange Afghanistan.
What I hear in the U.S. media, or really the international media that gets through to here, is that Kabul, the capital, is almost the only relatively safe place anymore, and it's pretty dangerous and chaotic and violent in most of the rest of the country. Is that your experience?
Yeah, Kabul's not immune from what's happening across Afghanistan, and in fact, there have been a substantial number of attacks within Kabul itself, in the city itself. Been roughly 20 roadside bombings, the equivalent of suicide attacks in Kabul. The provinces surrounding Kabul themselves aren't very safe, so it affects the capital as well. And also there's this myth out there that the northern and western and central parts of Afghanistan are somewhat of a Shangri-La, and in fact they're not. They're not immune from the conflict in the south. Although the problems are different in those parts of the country, their warlords, like I said, still roam the streets, and they still have private militias, and they are fighting with each other, and those fights are causing substantial civilian casualties as well.
So if the security situation is backsliding, why is that? For all the talk of the need for more troops in Iraq, is there a need for more U.S. troops in Afghanistan?
Well, I'm not a military expert, but whatever will improve the security of the ordinary Afghans, maybe it doesn't necessarily mean more troops. Maybe it means better coordination of the existing resources in Afghanistan. But something has to be done. Yeah, like something has to be done, and something has to be done quickly.
Let's take a phone call. Here is Martin in Eastchester. Thanks for calling, Martin.
Yeah, I'd like to know his reaction to why, what the people think of the United States invading Afghanistan. Is it an occupation? Is it a revenge for 9/11?
Thank you. This is the war where supposedly we were welcomed with flowers as rescuers and saviors. How true is that?
It's very true. Afghanistan is still the war where the Afghans do want the international community there. The international community, the NATO, the coalition forces are still welcomed. It's not that the Afghans don't want them there. They don't view them as an occupying force. They're upset with the way that they've conducted the war. There have been some civilian casualties caused by NATO and coalition bombings, and they're upset about that. They're upset about not being reimbursed or compensated for the damages. And that's something that Human Rights Watch has been pushing for, is a compensation package for Afghans that have been affected by coalition and NATO mishaps.
Doesn't the U.S., I don't know about NATO as an organization, but doesn't the U.S. compensate after mishaps?
They do in Iraq, definitely, and they do to on some scale in Afghanistan. NATO, on the other hand, doesn't. They don't have a uniform policy. I shouldn't say that they don't do it at all. They have done it in a few instances in Kandahar province and probably others, but they don't have a uniform policy like the United States does in Iraq.
Here is an unusual piece of footage posted on the web of American troops in Afghanistan hunting for food. You've heard of shooting fish in a barrel? Fillet of gunpowder, anyone? Is that just troops, you said you've seen this, is this just troops messing around because they need some kind of release?
I would assume so.
Yeah. The drug trade is something that we hear about in this country a lot with respect to Afghanistan. People want to say the war is not going well, talk about the revival of the poppy or opium farming and trade. From your experience, from your knowledge, what is the state of that? And does it have a relationship with the human rights situation?
Absolutely. And this is really one of the big problems that Afghanistan is facing now, is that not only do you have a resurgent Taliban and a renewed war, you have opium poppy production at levels almost never experienced before in Afghanistan. And it's affecting the United States and Europe. There were recent reports in the media with the U.S. and U.K. Police officials talking about the flood of heroin in U.S. markets, ostensibly from Afghanistan. It really affects almost every aspect of society, and the narcotics trade and the revenue generated from it reaches all the way up to the highest levels of the Karzai administration. And that does have an effect on the human rights situation in Afghanistan. I shouldn't say many, but there are several individuals in the Karzai administration as well as other government officials that are linked with the drug trade that are also have a history of human rights abuses. And this is another problem with Afghanistan, is that, it also has links to the insurgency, is that Karzai really needs to clean up his administration. If Karzai doesn't clean up his administration, you really will see the insurgency get a little bit stronger. It is feeding off of the issue of corruption. drug-related corruption.
Yeah. To the extent that the Taliban is popular in the country and not just militarily strong and imposing their will in various places, to what extent is that true, and to what does the Taliban owe its popularity?
Well, the Taliban owe its popularity primarily to the fact that the Karzai administration really hasn't lived up to its expectations. It hasn't fulfilled, President Karzai hasn't fulfilled many of his campaign promises. Also, he stacked his former cabinets, and in this cabinet there's some pretty nasty characters. Also in the Afghan parliament, there were some pretty nasty characters elected to the upper and lower house of the parliament. And this really fuels a lot of cynicism and frustration with the Karzai administration. The fact that ordinary Afghans look to their government, and yet they see people that they associate with horrendous crimes. And the Taliban actually use the presence of these warlords in the government as justification for continuing the insurgency.
Now, I'll be honest with our viewers that we were going to have a second guest on with you who couldn't make it at the last minute, who was going to talk about the Afghan community here in New York. This is not your specialty, but you do live here in New York when you're in the States. Do you travel in Afghan-American circles at all, or eat at Afghan-American or Afghan restaurants?
I have a few Afghan friends here in the city. In terms of Afghan culture, I would say probably the closest that I've come to it is visiting a few carpet shops here on Madison Avenue, or I've, Fifth Avenue, and then I've been to a couple Afghan restaurants.
You got a favorite?
Bamiyan.
Bamiyan,
yeah,
where is
Bamiyan. It? I believe it's over on 3rd and 23rd. I'm not too sure. Look it up. It's worth going.
What'd you eat there?
I usually eat the staple, the Afghan staple called kabli palau, which is a mix of rice, raisins, carrots, and lamb.
There was a report a couple of years ago about an Afghan mosque in Flushing where, reportedly at least, the congregation was divided between support for the Taliban or not. You think that's an issue in New York, the Afghan population divided?
I really can't comment on on that issue. I can say that it is an issue in Afghanistan with support for the Taliban and support for the Karzai administration. It was that, as I alluded to earlier, the Karzai administration really doesn't have the greatest reputation. And the presence of warlords in its ranks is really delegitimizing the government. And the police in general are viewed upon as viewed as predatory. And the police are usually the first line of contact with the ordinary Afghan. And the Taliban are promising to clean up Afghanistan like they did in 94, in 95, in 96.
As the Muslim fundamentalists do in so many countries in their opposition to corrupt
right.
administrations.
I mean, in some parts of Afghanistan, it resonates when they say, hey, we're a better alternative than what Kabul has to offer.
When do you go back?
Hopefully in a few months.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much as well.
And that's it for tonight's show. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Next week, more Earth to New York. It'll be Cuba to New York. And don't forget my daily radio show on WNYC, New York Public Radio, weekday mornings at 10. Tomorrow morning, Senator Chuck Schumer takes your calls live. That's at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning on WNYC 93.9 FM and 820 AM. Have a great night.